Question 1. When collecting data on a client's behavior, using a written definition that specifies exactly what the behavior looks like is known as A. Operational definition. B. Functional assessment. C. Preference assessment. D. Task analysis. Answer A. Operational definition. This question is about how we precisely describe behaviors in ABA. The keyword written definition that specifies exactly what the behavior looks like points directly to the concept of an operational definition. An operational definition provides clear objective criteria for what counts as an instance of the behavior and what does not, so anyone observing the behavior would agree on whether it occurred. For example, instead of saying aggression, an operational definition might be hitting another person with an open or closed hand. This ensures consistent data collection. Remember, an operational definition makes the behavior observable and measurable. Question 2. A BCBA is observing a child who frequently cries when asked to clean up toys. The crying stops immediately when the parent removes the toy cleanup task. This might be an example of the crying being maintained by A. Positive reinforcement. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive punishment. D. Negative punishment. Answer B. Negative reinforcement. This question describes a situation where a behavior, crying, is followed by the removal of something aversive, the cleanup task, and this consequence makes the behavior more likely to occur in the future, maintained. The keywords crying stops immediately when the parent removes the toy cleanup task, and implies the behavior is maintained by this outcome, indicating reinforcement. Since something is being removed, negative, and the behavior is increasing or maintained, reinforcement. This is negative reinforcement. The child learns that crying leads to the removal of the unpleasant task. Think of negative reinforcement as escaping or avoiding something unpleasant. Question 3. What is the primary purpose of conducting a functional behavior assessment, FBA? A. To teach the client new skills. B. To identify the function or purpose of a behavior. C. To determine a client's favorite items. D. To punish challenging behavior. Answer B. To identify the function or purpose of a behavior. This question asks about the main goal of a functional behavior assessment, or FBA. The term functional in FBA is the main clue here, meaning it's focused on the function or reason why a behavior occurs. An FBA involves collecting information to understand what triggers a behavior and what consequences maintain it, helping us figure out the behavior's purpose for the individual example to get attention, escape a task, get an item, or for sensory input. Understanding the function is crucial for developing effective interventions. It's not about teaching skills or picking rewards, but about figuring out why the behavior is happening. Question 4. Extinction, in the context of ABA, refers to A. Immediately stopping a behavior from occurring. B. Providing reinforcement every time a behavior occurs. C. Withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior. D. Punishing a behavior until it stops. Answer C. Withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior. This question defines extinction, a key principle in behavior analysis. Extinction involves no longer providing the reinforcement that maintained a behavior, which leads to a decrease in that behavior over time. The crucial phrase is withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior. For example, if a child tantrums, previously reinforced by getting a cookie, and the parent stops giving cookies when tantrums occur, this is extinction. It's not about punishment, it's about removing the consequence that was keeping the behavior going. Remember, extinction is breaking the link between the behavior and its reinforcer. Question 5. A multiple stimulus without replacement, MSWO, preference assessment involves A. Presenting 2 stimuli at a time. B. Presenting multiple stimuli simultaneously and items selected are removed from the array on subsequent trials. C. Presenting stimuli one at a time. D. Asking the client what they prefer. Answer: B. Presenting multiple stimuli simultaneously and items selected are removed from the array on subsequent trials. This question describes a specific type of preference assessment called MSWO. The keywords multiple stimulus without replacement are important. Multiple stimulus means several items are presented at once. Without replacement means when a client chooses an item, that item is not put back in the array for the next choice. This method helps create a hierarchy of preferences from the most to least preferred item among the presented set. It's a systematic way to identify powerful reinforcers. Question 6. Which ethical code principle emphasizes promoting independence and self-sufficiency for the client? A. Benefit others. B. Uphold professionalism. C. Be just. D. Treat with compassion, dignity, and respect. Answer: A. Benefit others. This question relates to the core ethical principles guiding behavior analysts. The principle of benefit others specifically includes working to maximize benefits and minimize harm, and a key aspect of maximizing benefits is promoting the client's independence, autonomy, and quality of life. While other principles are important, promoting independence most directly aligns with the goal of helping clients function effectively and self-sufficiently in their environment. Our interventions should aim to empower the individual. Question 7. A behavior is defined as anything a person does that is: A. Observable and measurable. B. Only internally experienced. C. Caused by external factors only. D. Always inappropriate or challenging. Answer: A. Observable and measurable. This is a fundamental definition in behavior analysis. A behavior, from an ABA perspective, is an action that can be seen and counted or recorded in some way. The words observable and measurable are the defining characteristics. This allows us to collect objective data and track changes in behavior. Thoughts or feelings, while real, are not directly observable behaviors in this context, unless they are expressed through something observable like verbal report. Question 8. The dead man's test helps determine if something is a behavior. Which statement passes the dead man's test? A. Being happy. B. Not crying. C. Running. D. Being quiet. Answer: C. Running. The dead man's test is a humorous way to check if something is truly a behavior. The test states, if a dead man can do it, it is not a behavior. If a dead man cannot do it, it is a behavior. Being happy, not crying, and being quiet are things a dead man can do, or fail to do, in the case of crying being quiet. Running, however, is an action that requires a living person. A dead man cannot run. This simple test helps clarify whether you're defining an active response. Question 9. What type of data collection involves recording every instance of a behavior within a specific observation period? A. Interval recording. B. Duration recording. C. Frequency recording. D. Partial interval recording. Answer: C. Frequency recording. This question describes frequency recording, also known as event recording. The phrase recording every instance of a behavior is the key clue. Frequency recording is used for behaviors that have a clear beginning and end and are not happening at such a high rate that they are difficult to count. You simply count how many times the behavior occurs during your observation. For example, counting how many times a student raises their hand in class. Question 10. The consequence that decreases the future probability of a behavior is called: A. Reinforcement. B. Punishment. C. Extinction. D. Antecedent. Answer: B. Punishment. This question asks for the term describing a consequence that reduces the likelihood of a behavior happening again. The core definition of punishment is that it is a consequence that results in a decrease in the future probability of the behavior it follows. Reinforcement increases behavior. Extinction decreases it by withholding reinforcement, and an antecedent comes before the behavior. Punishment makes the behavior less likely next time. Question 11. When a previously reinforced behavior is put on extinction, you might initially see a temporary increase in the frequency, intensity, or variability of the behavior. This is known as A. Spontaneous recovery, B. Behavior contrast, C. Extinction burst, D. Habituation. Answer: C. Extinction burst. This question describes a common phenomenon that occurs when extinction procedures are first implemented. The words temporary increase and frequency, intensity, or variability of the behavior when put on extinction are the defining features of an extinction burst. It's like the individual is trying harder or in different ways to get the reinforcement that used to be available. For example, if turning a key always started a car but suddenly stops working, you might turn the key harder or faster initially, an extinction burst. Question 12. What is the primary ethical consideration regarding client confidentiality? A. Sharing client information with anyone on the client's team. B. Discussing client progress openly with family members. C. Protecting client information and only sharing it with authorized individuals or with explicit consent. D. Using client names in public presentations for training purposes. Answer: C. Protecting client information and only sharing it with authorized individuals or with explicit consent. This question is about a fundamental ethical obligation: client confidentiality. The phrase protecting client information and only sharing it with authorized individuals or with explicit consent summarizes the core requirement. Behavior analysts are bound by ethical codes to keep client information private and secure. Information can only be shared with those directly involved in the client's care who have a legitimate need to know, or when the client, or guardian, provides written consent, or when legally required, like reporting abuse. It's about respecting the client's privacy. Question 13. An antecedent is A. The consequence that follows a behavior. B. A stimulus that occurs immediately before a behavior. C. The behavior itself. D. A desired outcome of intervention. Answer: B. A stimulus that occurs immediately before a behavior. This question defines an antecedent, which is the A in the ABC, antecedent behavior consequence, framework. An antecedent is simply anything that happens in the environment before the behavior occurs. It can be a person, place, object, time, or internal event that might set the occasion for the behavior. For example, seeing a red light is an antecedent to pressing the brake pedal. Antecedents help us understand the context in which behaviors happen. Question 14. A continuous measurement procedure where you record the total time a behavior occurs is called A. Frequency, B. Latency, C. Duration, D. Interresponse time, IRT. Answer: C. Duration. This question asks about measuring the length of time a behavior happens. The key phrase, total time a behavior occurs, defines duration recording. You use duration when you're interested in how long a behavior lasts, such as the duration of a tantrum or the duration of time spent reading. It's a continuous measurement because you are tracking the behavior for the entire time it is happening. Question 15. A schedule of reinforcement where a behavior is reinforced after an unpredictable number of responses is called A. Fixed ratio, FR. B. Variable ratio, VR. C. Fixed interval, FI. D. Variable interval, VI. Answer: B. Variable ratio, VR. This question describes a specific schedule of reinforcement. The keywords unpredictable number of responses are the defining characteristics of a variable ratio, VR, schedule. The reinforcement is delivered after an average number of responses, but the exact number changes each time. VR schedules typically produce high, steady rates of responding, like playing a slot machine. You don't know exactly how many pulls it will take to win, but you know it's based on the number of plays. Ratio refers to the number of responses, and variable means it changes. Question 16. Generalization of a skill occurs when a client A. Learns a new skill in one specific setting. B. Performs a learned skill in new settings with new people or using different materials. C. Stops performing a previously learned skill. D. Requires prompts to perform a skill. Answer: B. Performs a learned skill in new settings with new people or using different materials. This question defines generalization, which is a critical goal in ABA. Generalization means that a skill learned in one specific situation carries over to other similar situations. The phrase performs a learned skill in new settings with new people or using different materials captures the essence of generalization. We want clients to be able to use their skills in their everyday lives, not just in the therapy room. Teaching a child to greet their therapist and then seeing them greet their teacher and peers is an example of generalization. Question 17. What is the purpose of prompting? A. To provide reinforcement for a behavior. B. To decrease the likelihood of a correct response. C. To increase the likelihood that a client will make a correct response. D. To test if a skill has been mastered. Answer: C. To increase the likelihood that a client will make a correct response. This question is about the role of prompts in teaching. Prompts are supports or cues given before or during a behavior to guide the client toward the correct response. The goal is to make it more likely that the client will perform the skill correctly, especially when they are just learning it. For example, giving a gestural prompt, pointing, or a verbal prompt, say ball, helps the learner respond correctly. Prompts are temporary supports used during the learning process. Question 18. Differential reinforcement involves A. Reinforcing one behavior while punishing another. B. Reinforcing all instances of a target behavior. C. Reinforcing one behavior while withholding reinforcement for another behavior. D. Only reinforcing appropriate behaviors. Answer: C. Reinforcing one behavior while withholding reinforcement for another behavior. This question defines differential reinforcement, a common procedure in ABA. Differential reinforcement means you provide reinforcement for one specific behavior, often a desired alternative or incompatible behavior, and simultaneously use extinction, withhold reinforcement for another behavior, often the challenging behavior. The idea is to make the desired behavior more likely by reinforcing it, while making the challenging behavior less likely by not reinforcing it. You are reinforcing differentially between two behaviors. Question 19. A behavior intervention plan, BAP, should primarily be based on A. Staff preferences. B. The function of the behavior. C. What worked for another client with similar behavior. D. Punishment procedures. Answer: B. The function of the behavior. This question asks what should be the foundation of a behavior intervention plan. A key principle in ABA is that interventions are most effective when they address why a behavior is happening, which is its function. The BIP should be developed based on the findings of the Functional Behavior Assessment, FBA. If you understand the function example, the behavior gets attention, your intervention can target that function example, teach a better way to get attention. This makes the plan more likely to be successful. Question 20. When delivering a reinforcer, it is most effective to deliver it. A. Before the behavior occurs. B. Immediately after the behavior occurs. C. Long after the behavior occurs. D. only sometimes after the behavior occurs. Answer B. Immediately after the behavior occurs. This question is about the timing of reinforcement delivery for maximum effectiveness. Reinforcers are most powerful when delivered contingently and immediately after the desired behavior. The closer in time the reinforcer follows the behavior, the clearer the connection is for the learner between their action and the positive outcome, making the behavior more likely to occur again. Waiting too long can lead the learner to associate the reinforcer with a different behavior. Question 21. A man is a verbal behavior controlled by A. A non-verbal stimulus and specifies its reinforcer, example, seeing a cookie and saying cookie. B. A verbal stimulus from another person, and the response is the same form, example, someone says ball, and you say ball. C. A motivating operation, like deprivation or satiation, and specifies its reinforcer, example, being thirsty and saying water. D. An internal thought or feeling. Answer C. A motivating operation, like deprivation or satiation, and specifies its reinforcer, example, being thirsty and saying water. This question tests understanding of a specific verbal operant, the mand. A mand is essentially a request or a command. It is unique because it is controlled by a motivating operation, like wanting or needing something, and the consequence is receiving the specific item or action requested. The example being thirsty and saying water perfectly illustrates this. The thirst, motivating operation, prompts the request, water, and getting water is the reinforcer. It's verbal behavior that gets the speaker something they want. Question 22. Which measurement procedure involves recording if a behavior occurred at any point during a specific interval? A. Frequency recording. B. Duration recording. C. Partial interval recording. D. Whole interval recording. Answer C. Partial interval recording. This question describes a specific discontinuous measurement method. In partial interval recording, you divide the observation period into small intervals, example 10 seconds, and simply record if the behavior happened at all during that interval. You don't need it to happen for the whole interval, just part of it. This method is good for behaviors that don't have a clear beginning and end or happen at a high rate. It often overestimates the duration or frequency. Question 23. Discrimination training involves A. Teaching a client to perform a skill in all settings. B. Reinforcing a behavior in the presence of one stimulus, SD, and not reinforcing it in the presence of another stimulus, SD. C. Withholding all reinforcement for a behavior. D. Teaching multiple skills simultaneously. Answer B. Reinforcing a behavior in the presence of one stimulus, SD, and not reinforcing it in the presence of another stimulus, SD. This question describes discrimination training, which teaches a client to respond differently to different stimuli. The core concept is reinforcing a behavior when a specific stimulus is present, called the discriminative stimulus, or SD, and not reinforcing that same behavior when a different stimulus is present, called the S delta, or SD. For example, teaching a child to say red only when shown a red card, SD, and not when shown a blue card, SD. This helps the learner know when a behavior will be reinforced. Question 24. What is a conditioned reinforcer? A. A stimulus that is naturally reinforcing, like food or water. B. A stimulus that was previously neutral but has become reinforcing through association with a primary reinforcer. C. A stimulus that decreases the future probability of a behavior. D. A prompt used to evoke a behavior. Answer B. A stimulus that was previously neutral but has become reinforcing through association with a primary reinforcer. This question asks about conditioned reinforcers, also known as secondary reinforcers. Unlike unconditioned primary reinforcers that are naturally reinforcing, like food when hungry. A conditioned reinforcer is something that learns to be reinforcing because it has been paired with a primary reinforcer or another established conditioned reinforcer. Money, praise, and tokens are common examples. They aren't reinforcing from birth, but become reinforcing because they are associated with getting primary reinforcers. Question 25. A visual schedule is an example of A. Reinforcement system. B. Antecedent intervention. C. Consequence strategy. D. Measurement tool. Answer B. Antecedent intervention. This question asks about the category that a visual schedule falls under in an intervention plan. A visual schedule is put in place before behaviors occur to provide structure, predictability, and information about what will happen next. Because it comes before the behavior and is designed to prevent potential challenging behaviors or set the occasion for appropriate behaviors, it is considered an antecedent intervention. It helps manage expectations and transitions. Question 26. Which term refers to observing and recording what happens immediately before a behavior occurs, the behavior itself, and what happens immediately after the behavior occurs? A. Preference assessment. B. Anecdotal recording. C. ABC data collection. D. Skills assessment. Answer C. ABC data collection. This question describes ABC data collection, a fundamental assessment method in ABA. ABC stands for antecedent, what happened before the behavior, a description of the behavior, and consequence, what happened immediately after the behavior. This method helps to identify patterns and potential functions of behavior by looking at the environmental context surrounding it. It's a direct observation method. Question 27. When developing a behavior intervention plan, ethical considerations require the BCBA too. A. Recommend only the least restrictive procedures first. B. Use the most powerful punishment procedures immediately. C. Prioritize staff convenience over client needs. D. Avoid involving the client or guardian in the planning process. Answer A. Recommend only the least restrictive procedures first. This question highlights an important ethical guideline when creating intervention plans. The ethical code mandates that behavior analysts recommend the least restrictive procedures likely to be effective first. This means starting with strategies that are less intrusive and provide the client with more freedom and dignity, like reinforcement-based strategies. Before considering more restrictive options, like punishment, it's about ensuring the client's rights and well-being are protected. Question 28. A child says car after seeing a picture of a car. This is an example of which verbal operant? A. Mand. B. Tact. C. Etroic. D. Intraverbal. Answer B. Tact. This question describes a tact, another type of verbal behavior. A tact is controlled by a nonverbal stimulus, like seeing an object, picture, smell, sound, etc., and is reinforced by generalized conditioned reinforcement, like praise. In this example, the nonverbal stimulus is seeing the picture of the car, which occasions the verbal response, car. It's like labeling or naming something in the environment. Question 29. What is the purpose of a baseline phase in a single subject design? A. To implement the intervention. B. To return the behavior to its original level. C. To measure the behavior before the intervention is introduced. D. To reinforce the target behavior. Answer C. To measure the behavior before the intervention is introduced. This question asks about the baseline phase, which is the first step in many single-subject research designs used in ABA. The purpose of the baseline phase is to collect data on the target behavior before any intervention is implemented. This provides a point of comparison to see what the behavior looks like naturally and helps determine if the intervention had an effect once it is introduced. It's the before picture. Question 30. A student receives a sticker every time they complete 5 math problems correctly. This is an example of which schedule of reinforcement? A. FR5. B. VR5. C. Phi5. D. VI5. Answer: A. FR5. This question describes a specific schedule of reinforcement. The student gets a sticker every time they complete 5 math problems. Every time indicates a fixed schedule, and 5 math problems indicates a specific number of responses. Therefore, this is a fixed ratio. FR, schedule, specifically FR5, because reinforcement is delivered after exactly 5 responses. Ratio refers to the number of responses, and fixed means the number is constant. Question 31. What is the primary focus when teaching a new skill using discrete trial training, DTT? A. Teaching the skill in a natural, unstructured environment. B. Breaking down the skill into small steps and teaching each step separately in a structured format. C. Allowing the client to choose what skill they want to learn. D. Primarily using peer models for instruction. Answer: B. Breaking down the skill into small steps and teaching each step separately in a structured format. This question asks about discrete trial training, DTT, a highly structured teaching method. DTT involves breaking down a complex skill into smaller, manageable steps. Each step is then taught in a structured, one-on-one format, often involving an instruction, SD, the client's response, and a consequence, reinforcement or error correction. It's characterized by its structure and repeated, discrete trials of the same skill step. Question 32. An echoic is a verbal behavior controlled by A. A nonverbal stimulus. B. A verbal stimulus and response has point-to-point correspondence and formal similarity. C. A motivating operation. D. An internal thought. Answer: B. A verbal stimulus and the response has point-to-point correspondence and formal similarity. This question defines the echoic, another verbal operant. An echoic is when someone hears a verbal stimulus and repeats it. The key characteristics are point-to-point correspondence. Every part of the stimulus matches every part of the response, like saying ball when someone says ball, and formal similarity. The stimulus and response are in the same form. Both are spoken words. It's essentially verbal imitation. Question 33. What is the purpose of shaping? A. To reinforce a behavior every single time it occurs. B. To teach a behavior by reinforcing successive approximations towards the target behavior. C. To withhold reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior. D. To prompt a behavior until it occurs correctly. Answer: B. To teach a behavior by reinforcing successive approximations towards the target behavior. This question describes shaping, a procedure used to teach new behaviors. Shaping involves reinforcing behaviors that are increasingly similar to the desired target behavior, while no longer reinforcing earlier, less similar versions. The phrase reinforcing successive approximations towards the target behavior is the core definition. You start by reinforcing a behavior that is just a little bit like the goal and gradually require responses that are closer and closer to the final behavior. For example, shaping a child to say bubble might start by reinforcing saying buh, then bub, then bubble. Question 34. A stimulus that signals that a behavior will be reinforced if performed is called a SD, S delta. B. MO, motivating operation. C. SD, discriminative stimulus. D. Punisher. Answer: C. SD, discriminative stimulus. This question defines the discriminative stimulus, or SD. An SD is a stimulus that is present when a behavior is reinforced. It signals to the individual that reinforcement is available if the behavior is performed in its presence. For example, a stop sign, SD, signals that pressing the brake pedal will be reinforced by avoiding accident or ticket. It sets the occasion for a specific behavior because that behavior has been reinforced in its presence before. Question 35. Which ethical principle guides BCBAs to stay within their area of expertise and competence? A. Be kind. B. Be just. C. Be truthful. D. Uphold professionalism. Answer: D. Uphold professionalism. This question relates to the ethical principle of upholding professionalism. This principle includes responsibilities like maintaining competence through ongoing education, practicing only within one's scope of competence, seeking supervision or consultation when needed, and representing oneself accurately. Staying within your area of expertise is a key part of being a responsible and professional practitioner. Question 36. Inter-observer agreement, (HIOA), is used to A. Train staff on new procedures. B. Determine the function of a behavior. C. Assess the reliability of data collection. D. Measure client preference. Answer: C. Assess the reliability of data collection. This question asks about the purpose of inter-observer agreement, (IOA). IOA involves having two or more independent observers collect data on the same behavior at the same time, and then comparing their recordings to see how closely they match. The purpose is to check the consistency and accuracy of the data collection methods and ensure that the behavior definition is clear and being applied reliably. High IOA indicates that the data is trustworthy. Question 37. What is a token economy? A. A system where clients earn tokens for specific behaviors and exchange them for reinforcers. B. A type of preference assessment. C. A procedure to punish challenging behaviors. D. A method for collecting frequency data. Answer: A. A system where clients earn tokens for specific behaviors and exchange them for reinforcers. This question defines a token economy, a common behavior change system. In a token economy, clients earn generalized conditioned reinforcers, tokens, points, stickers, etc., immediately after displaying desired behaviors. These tokens can then be exchanged later for a variety of backup reinforcers, preferred activities, items, privileges. It's a way to bridge the gap between the behavior and a larger reinforcer and allows for reinforcement of many different behaviors. Question 38. What happens during a pairing procedure? A. Two challenging behaviors are targeted simultaneously. B. A previously neutral stimulus is presented with a reinforcer to make the neutral stimulus reinforcing. C. A client and therapist work together to identify goals. D. Data is collected on two different behaviors at once. Answer: B. A previously neutral stimulus is presented with a reinforcer to make the neutral stimulus reinforcing. This question describes the process of pairing, often used to establish rapport and make instructional settings enjoyable. Pairing involves consistently presenting a previously neutral stimulus, like the therapist or the therapy room, at the same time as a known reinforcer. Over time, the neutral stimulus becomes associated with the reinforcer and can itself become a conditioned reinforcer and evoke positive emotions. Think of associating yourself with fun things so the client likes being with you. Question 39. A graph in ABA is primarily used to A. Explain ABA concepts to parents. B. Visually display data to show behavior change over time. C. Store confidential client information. D. Determine the function of a behavior. Answer: B. Visually display data to show behavior change over time. This question asks about the main purpose of graphs in ABA. Graphs are essential tools for visualizing the data collected on a client's behavior. By plotting data points over time, behavior analysts can clearly see trends, patterns, and whether an intervention is having the desired effect. It provides a clear visual summary of progress or lack thereof. Seeing the data helps guide decision-making. Question 40. What is the main difference between positive and negative reinforcement? A. Positive reinforcement increases behavior. Negative reinforcement decreases behavior. B. Positive reinforcement involves adding a stimulus. Negative reinforcement involves removing a stimulus. C. Positive reinforcement is planned. Negative reinforcement happens accidentally. D. Positive reinforcement is always better than negative reinforcement. Answer. B. Positive reinforcement involves adding a stimulus. Negative reinforcement involves removing a stimulus. This question highlights the key distinction between positive and negative reinforcement. Both procedures increase the future probability of a behavior. That's what reinforcement means. The difference lies in whether something is added. Positive means adding a stimulus, or removed. Negative means removing an aversive stimulus as a consequence of the behavior. Think of the math symbols. Plus for positive, adding for negative, removing, both make the behavior happen more. Question 41. Which concept involves providing a consequence that decreases the future probability of a behavior by removing a reinforcing stimulus? A. Positive reinforcement. B. Positive punishment. C. Negative reinforcement. D. Negative punishment. Answer. D. Negative punishment. This question describes negative punishment. The key elements are that the consequence decreases the future probability of a behavior, punishment, and it does so by removing a reinforcing stimulus, negative. A common example is taking away a toy, removing a reinforcer, from a child who hit their sibling, resulting in the hitting behavior becoming less likely in the future. It's taking something good away to decrease behavior. Question 42. What is the term for teaching a skill that is incompatible with a challenging behavior? A. Extinction. B. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, DRI. C. Response cost. D. Timeout. Answer. B. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, DRI. This question asks about a specific type of differential reinforcement. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, DRI, is a procedure where you reinforce a behavior that cannot happen at the same time as the challenging behavior you want to decrease. The key word is incompatible. For example, reinforcing a child for sitting in their seat makes it impossible for them to be running around the room at the same time. You reinforce the incompatible behavior. Question 43. A functional analysis involves A. Indirect assessment only. B. Systematically manipulating environmental variables to determine the function of a behavior. C. Asking caregivers about the behavior. D. Directly observing the behavior in natural settings without manipulation. Answer. B. Systematically manipulating environmental variables to determine the function of a behavior. This question describes a functional analysis, a specific and rigorous type of functional behavior assessment. A functional analysis goes beyond observation and interviews by arranging different test conditions, where specific antecedents and consequences are systematically presented to see which condition reliably results in the target behavior. This helps directly test hypotheses about the behavior's function by manipulating the environment. It's like a controlled experiment to find the function. Question 44. When is it ethically permissible to use punishment procedures? A. Whenever a behavior is challenging. B. Only after less restrictive procedures have been attempted and found ineffective. C. As the first course of action to quickly stop a behavior. D. Without guardian consent if the behavior is severe. Answer. B. Only after less restrictive procedures have been attempted and found ineffective. This question relates to the ethical use of punishment. Ethical guidelines require that punishment procedures, which are often more restrictive and pose greater risks, should only be considered when positive, less intrusive methods have been tried and were not sufficient to address the challenging behavior. This is part of the requirement to use the least restrictive effective procedures. Informed consent and careful monitoring are also crucial. Question 45. What is a task analysis? A preference assessment procedure. B. Breaking down a complex skill into smaller sequential steps. C. Identifying the function of a behavior. D. Collecting frequency data on a behavior. Answer. B. Breaking down a complex skill into smaller sequential steps. This question defines a task analysis. A task analysis is a process of taking a complex skill or chain of behaviors, like washing hands or making a sandwich, and breaking it down into a series of smaller individual steps that are performed in a specific order. This makes the skill easier to teach and learn, as you can teach one step at a time. It's like creating a step-by-step guide for a skill. Question 46. A motivating operation, MO, is an environmental variable that A. Signals that reinforcement is available for a behavior. B. Decreases the effectiveness of a reinforcer and increases the frequency of behaviors that have resulted in that reinforcer in the past. C. Alters the effectiveness of a stimulus as a reinforcer and alters the frequency of behavior that has been reinforced by that stimulus. D. Follows a behavior and makes it more likely to occur again. Answer. C. Alters the effectiveness of a stimulus as a reinforcer and alters the frequency of behavior that has been reinforced by that stimulus. This question describes a motivating operation, MO. An MO has two main effects. It changes how much you want something, alters the effectiveness of a stimulus as a reinforcer, and it changes how often you perform behaviors that have gotten you that thing in the past, alters the frequency of relevant behavior. For example, being hungry. MO makes food more reinforcing and makes you more likely to look for food. It influences the value of consequences and the behaviors related to them. Question 47. When conducting a skills assessment, the primary goal is to A. Identify challenging behaviors. B. Determine what skills a client already has and what skills need to be taught. C. Find out what motivates the client. D. Measure how long a behavior occurs. Answer. B. Determine what skills a client already has and what skills need to be taught. This question is about the purpose of a skills assessment. A skills assessment, like the VBMAPP or ABLSR, is used to evaluate a client's current abilities across various developmental domains, example language, social skills, daily living skills. The goal is to identify their strengths and deficits, which then informs what goals should be included in their intervention plan. It's a way to see what skills are in the client's repertoire. Question 48. Which type of graph is most commonly used in ABA to show the change in a single subject's behavior over time? A. Bar graph. B. Scatter plot. C. Line graph. D. Pie chart. Answer. C. Line graph. This question asks about the standard graph type used in ABA for single subject designs. A line graph, specifically a time series line graph, is preferred because it clearly shows the level and trend of a single individual's behavior over time, across different phases, like baseline and intervention. Each data point is connected by a line, making it easy to see how the behavior changes day to day or session to session. Question 49. A private event, like a thought or feeling, is considered a behavior in ABA when A. It can be directly observed by others. B. It is reported by the individual, verbal behavior. C. It is the cause of an observable behavior. D. It is impossible to measure. Answer. B. It is reported by the individual, verbal behavior. This question touches on how ABA addresses private events. While thoughts and feelings themselves are not directly observable by others, the act of reporting them is a verbal behavior that can be observed and analyzed. From an ABA perspective, private events can function as antecedents or consequences, and verbal reports about them can be studied, but the events themselves are not typically targeted for direct intervention unless they lead to observable challenging behaviors or can be measured through physiological means. We analyze what is said about the private event. Question 50. What is the purpose of delivering reinforcement on an intermittent schedule, as opposed to continuously? A. To make the behavior less likely to occur. B. To make the behavior more resistant to extinction. C. To make the behavior happen faster. D. To ensure the behavior happens every single time. Answer: B. To make the behavior more resistant to extinction. This question asks about the benefit of using intermittent reinforcement schedules after a behavior has been initially learned. Once a behavior is acquired using continuous reinforcement, reinforcing every instance, switching to an intermittent schedule, reinforcing only sometimes, makes the behavior more durable and harder to extinguish. When reinforcement is not expected every time, the behavior continues for longer even if reinforcement is temporarily unavailable. Think of how long someone might keep trying a broken vending machine if it used to work only sometimes versus if it always worked before it broke.